Welcome to the BK Show podcast. This is episode number 39, and today I am joined by Steve Chou. Steve is the host of the My Wife Quit Her Job podcast and co-host of the Profitable Audience podcast, founder of MyWifeQuitHerJob.com and Bumblebee Linens, and is the founder of the Profitable Online Store course and co-founder of the Profitable Audience online course. Steve does a lot of things. I've been following him for a very long time, as you'll hear in this show, and I was fortunate enough to meet him a couple years ago, and then I have seen him at a few different ECF lives and in the ECF forums. If you're not familiar with what ECF is, I had Andrew Guderian, the founder of that, on this podcast as well, episode 17. Definitely check that out. Real quick before we get started, you may have heard John Warren and myself a few episodes ago messing around and thinking about starting a Patreon together where we get really deep into our businesses and in the high-ticket dropshipping model. We have started that. Episode 1 is already out. If you want to go listen to that podcast and become a patron of our Patreon, go to dropshippodcast.com. We'd love to have you over there. I think you're going to like a little bit different takes over there, a little bit deeper talks and the ability to look behind the scenes of some of our businesses and really talk deeper than we do on some of our public facing stuff. So again, if you want to check out that podcast, it is $5 an episode. You get access to the full back library as soon as you sign up. So you will get access to episode 1 and you're only charged when we put out a podcast. So check it out, dropshippodcast.com if you're interested in that. But without further ado, let's jump into today's episode of the BK Show with Steve Chou. Steve Chou, welcome to the show, buddy.
Glad to be here, man.
So our first run-in, as we were talking before the show, was Traffic and Conversion 2018, and you were like this god to me. You were somebody that was like on a whole nother level, and I met you, and I took a selfie with you, and I felt like such a cheese ball, like stopping you in the hallway and be like, oh my God, it's Steve Chou, let me get a photo.
No, I really appreciate when that happens. It makes me feel good, and I really appreciated it, actually.
Yeah, it's weird, though, and I was telling you before the call, I used to put everyone up on a pedestal. I used to think they had something I didn't have, or they knew something I didn't know. And as I got to know people, not specifically you, there's quite a few others. Maybe I should oust them one day, but they're all weirdo. Everyone's weird. No one knows what they're doing. A lot of them are honestly like a little sleazy in some cases that I've met, but they're all human. And it took me a long time to realize that everyone's just kind of winging it the whole time. I really thought that they had something figured out that I didn't.
Yep. Actually, that is so true. No one knows what they're doing. Even the guys who are doing really well, they don't know what they're doing. We're just winging it, trying things, and sometimes things work.
So you have an online course teaching people how to start, and now you have this new Profitable Audience podcast. How do you convey that to people? Because I'm not sure you could have told me anything in the beginning that I would have believed you that everyone was just winging it. I think I realized it in life when I became an adult. I always thought my parents had it figured out. Now that I'm, my age, I was a teenager when my parents were my age, and I don't know what the heck I'm doing either in parenthood either, right? And so what do you think you can do to convey that to people in the beginning, that we're all just human?
It's funny is the most common question I get asked is like, I need the formula, or I need this step by step in order on what to do. And there is no order. There's no step. Like there's people who can succeed in whatever order that they want. Different things work for different things. So I don't, if you want to rephrase that question you just asked me, but I mean, what I normally tell people is, hey, you're just going to have to find your own way. You're going to have these skills. Like you should learn these skills. And once you have these skills, then you just kind of have to go with the flow. Like wherever the river takes you, that's where you should use your skills to excel wherever you're at.
I would assume you get a lot of pushback on that, right? Like that's like, just have faith and believe everything will work out. You know what I mean? It sounds very
I'm just setting expectations, right? I mean, if the expectation, like, let's say someone signs up for my class and their expectation is, I'm going to follow this step, then this step, then this step. I mean, to a certain extent, you can have steps that you do, but at some point they're going to diverge. I just want to set the proper expectations, right? And the reason why I do that is because if you tell someone that if you follow these steps and you'll be making money within 6 months, and they don't make money in 6 months, they're going to give up. So that's why it's important to tell them, hey, this is going to take a year at least. And that way you'll stick with it, because you're mentally prepared to stick it out.
Yeah, I had a coach on a course back in the day of where I got started in the high ticket dropshipping, and then I had some courses on like AdWords for e-commerce, SEO for e-commerce, things like that. And I think the number one question we ever got was, can you guarantee my success? Or what if? And we ended up doing a podcast on that, just like kind of chastising that of like, let's not play the guarantee game. I can't guarantee whether you're going to do some work, but I would assume you get all of those questions in now both of your courses.
I mean, for certain personalities, like if I get on a Zoom call and I can get a sense of your personality and what you've accomplished in the past, sometimes I feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm almost sure that you're going to succeed. It's really based on the person's work ethic and their drive and their perseverance, really. Right. But yes, I get that question all the time.
Mm. Well, look, you're doing a lot of amazing things, and I want to touch on all of them. You've got the Profitable Online Store course, My Wife Quit Her Job. You've been around a long time as well. You now have Profitable Audience podcast and a Profitable Audience course, and I want to touch on all of those things and understand them. But if it's all right with you, I want to start with an L that you had that I'm actually shocked is an L. When you and Greg Mercer and Scott Volker and Mike Jackness came out with the 5-minute pitch, I was like, this is genius. This is fantastic marketing. Like, entertain people, give away some money. I did not understand how this didn't work. And so I'd love to dive in there, like really talk about what that was. And then in your opinion, in hindsight, why didn't that work?
It's actually not that it didn't work. And in fact, we're in talks of continue it. It's that everyone had different priorities. Now, it's one thing if one person was in charge, but there were 4 owners who wanted to do different things. And, Greg, I mean, he's like the CEO of a huge company now. And then Scott has his own priorities. Mike and I have our own priorities. And we went into this originally saying that we were going to do this for 3 to 5 years. But, things come up. And when you have 4 people diverging on different things, that's difficult to manage. So I think the first season actually went pretty well. And we were going to do another season. But yeah, when you just have different priorities, incidentally, this is why I don't have that many partnerships, because things like this can happen. It's not like it ended badly or anything. Like we're all buds, and we had discussions about doing another episode. But I think it's just tough when you have 4 different owners for something.
Yeah. So maybe I'm assuming. I thought I heard Mike Jackness say that it just didn't get the audience that it deserved, right? And so when I saw it, I was like, wow, this is like an online version of Shark Tank, right? This is like a new version of that. There was some really cool businesses that were pitched on there. It's all up on YouTube, I believe, still. So go check out 5-minute pitch. Yep. It just hit me. I was like, oh man, this is such a smart idea. Like, you guys are, doing the show, featuring all these people with really cool businesses, and then kind of cutting away and, featuring you, right? And the business you run, or featuring Greg Mercer in Jungle Scout, or Scott Volker in The Amazing Seller, or Mike and Ecom Crew. And I think you even had Pat Flynn and Andrew Udarian step in as judges. It just struck me.
That was the reason why I failed. We shouldn't have had Udarian on. We shouldn't have.
Oh man, I'm going to have to look up the podcast number. We definitely gave you a bunch of shit in that episode as well. Episode 17, if you want to listen to Andrew Udarian talk shit about Steve Chou, go back and check that out.
So I know what Mike's talking about, actually. Okay. So we went into this because combined, we had something like 750,000 email subscribers. Wow. And then our podcast combined had a lot of downloads. But what we found was that when you're launching something on YouTube, a lot of those audiences don't translate. So certain people who like read blogs, they're not on YouTube. People who listen to podcasts, they might not necessarily watch YouTube videos, right? So transferring audiences is very difficult.
Yeah, I can see that. Actually, it's something I've thought about lately after seeing Anthony Pompliano has his Pomp letter. And when I signed up to get his 1 a week free letter, it said, would you like the RSS feed as well? And I was like, that is genius. I'm a podcast guy through and through. I listen to a ton of them. And I don't want to go read your letter. I don't want to read your long email. I don't want to go read your blog post. That's just not what I'm into. But I am able to pop that in every Monday and listen to 10 minutes of him just reading it. And I was like, this is like a channel I enjoy listening to. So I can imagine if you have, like all of you guys have podcasts, right? For sure, Jackness and Volker has a huge one. He's been around a long time, and you as well. And so transferring those people over to YouTube had to be difficult. And I wonder if that would even work. Like, could you transition just the audio of that and put it out as a podcast?
We actually ended up doing the podcast, but I think in retrospect, we probably should have launched the podcast first. But if you think about like even Shark Tank, it actually didn't do that well its first season either. It takes time for people to know about it, which is why you have to take a long-term view of it, right? You have to build momentum. And so this is why we originally had a 3 to 5 year plan for that show.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I didn't know Shark Tank didn't take off because it wasn't like Dragon's Den in Canada.
It was Dragon's Den, but like if you look it up, because we looked up all this stuff, before we started, so to set the proper expectations for us. Like, we're going to do it this year. It's hopefully it'll take off, but realistically, it's going to take some time for it to take off.
So you think you'll ever get back to it at this point?
We're trying. So one thing that is a little bit problematic and is you need money to pay for the show, right? Mm-hmm. Video editing is actually very expensive. And then the fact that we're giving away $50,000, finding sponsors is challenging unless we're just funding this out of our own pocket. And again, I think, among the guys, different guys are willing to invest different amounts into the show.
Yeah.
Again, it's the fact that there are 4 cooks in the kitchen. I think that's...
Yeah, I've run into the same issue. That's the reason I exited the course business I was in. There was too many people with, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do it. And it ends up being tough, right? And you mentioned partnerships. I'm a big proponent of partnerships. I've been in some very, very poor ones that I maybe don't want to talk about. And I've been in some really, really great ones. And so one of my notes is to talk to you about Tony. Like, how did you meet Tony? Tony's your business partner on a few different things. How did you even meet her? And then can you talk to us about that?
We met at the World Domination Summit.
What is that?
I love telling the story, actually, because I thought she was kind of crazy when I first met her. Because we were just talking, and then I found out she had 7 kids, and then she homeschooled, and I was like, oh, okay. In your mind, you kind of classify her. At least I do. I mean, probably shouldn't have did this online,
I'm with you.
Yeah. But she was a mutual friend of ours. Jim is the one who kind of introduced us. And I ended up having her on the podcast because I thought she was amazing. The fact that she had 7 kids and homeschool and run like these awesome businesses, So I had her on the podcast, and we just kind of kept in touch over the years. And then one day, like, she came to an e-commerce conference with me. I think it might've been E-commerce Fuel, actually. And then the Startup Bros event. And so we started hanging out, and she was like, you should have an event, because it was something that it was in the back of my mind to have an event to build community, right? Because I really enjoy meeting people face to face. And that's kind of how we met, right? And she just happened to have run an event for the last 7 years. And I didn't know anything about events. So I was like, okay. She proposed that we partner up. She handles all the event stuff, and all I had to do is sell tickets and get the speakers. And that's how it started. And then I discovered that we work really well together, and we have this like banter going. And the next logical step was to start a podcast. And then she has a lot of skills, in the content creation aspect. And so we started a course also.
So what is the World Domination Summit? That sounds like a World Wrestling Federation.
You never heard of the
event.
World Domination Summit?
No, it seems like, again, WWE or something like that.
I think it's over now, which is maybe why you haven't heard of it. But it's Chris Gilbo. Do you know who that is?
Mm-mm.
I can't remember. He the $100 startup. He's written a bunch of books. It's more of like an inspirational type of conference. Like, you go and you hear stories of successful people, and that inspires you to get going. This was back in 2014. Yeah, and basically that conference was where a whole bunch of entrepreneurs used to go to hang out, and that's why I went to it.
And so how did you stumble into Tony? I've heard you say on one of your podcasts that when you go meet people, you like to rip them in order to like break the ice. So when she told you, I have 7 kids and I homeschool them, did you immediately start ripping into her?
I did not. So she was introduced by a mutual friend of ours, Jim. And so I was just kind of on my best behavior, actually. She might say something differently, but I didn't say anything. I wasn't sure what to expect, and I didn't want to like offend her in case like our mutual friend, because we have that connection.
Yeah, it makes sense. Look, your new podcast with her is dope. I told you that your My Wife Quit Her Job podcast is super tactical, but you two on there, very polarizing, right? Like, her opinions of very much a lot of feelings, and I told you I related, right? I definitely have a lot of those limiting beliefs and feelings, and then you literally every time she says this is how I think about something, you're like, yeah, I don't think that way at all, and then you lay out yours, which it's very like. For a second, you sound like an asshole, right? And you're like, what the hell, Steve? And then you explain it so eloquently that I'm like, yeah, I actually feel the same way as he does too. It's an awesome podcast for beginners out there that are thinking about getting started in anything. I think you guys explain a lot of the limiting beliefs and how to do some of the honestly simpler things in the beginning that seem really hard when you're starting. You guys do a great job of explaining it and bantering back and forth.
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah. I mean, it's my opportunity to tell like how it is, so to speak. We were talking about this earlier. With my other podcast, when I have guests, I always feel like I have to be on my best behavior because I don't want to offend, obviously, the guests that I'm interviewing, right? But on this other podcast, I can literally just say what's on my mind. And I'm not going to offend Tony, obviously. Not at this point.
So what stops you from like being yourself on the other podcast? Like, do you think you have to wear kid gloves around some guests and not like insert your opinion?
it's not that I don't insert my opinion, but I can't be too blunt. Like if it's someone I don't know that well, it's one thing if I wasn't the host, but since I'm the host, I have to be nice. I want the guest to feel comfortable, right? Like kind of here, I'm a guest on your show right now. You're probably not going to say anything offensive, right?
Maybe.
Potentially offensive. Maybe you would. I don't know. Maybe you would. I don't know.
I've been listening to you for a long time, so I do feel like I know you, right? That's the beauty of podcasts, I think, is you really get to know somebody. And I think now you're doing YouTube videos. I would probably feel like I know you even more, but I've been listening to you for probably since back when I started. And I really pictured you in a certain light, and then I saw you present at ECF, and I'm like, he's definitely a little more lighthearted. You were ripping Udarian, which is hilarious. And then this new podcast came out where I totally saw a different side of you, and that's what made me reach out. Actually, was like, I got to get him on here to just understand exactly who Steve Chou is, and maybe I don't know. I know you rip. You like to rip people. You and Udarian are always playing pranks, and I'm like, what can I rip him? I actually think one of the funniest things you do is the self-deprecating Chinese humor that you do. Like you constantly like rip on Chinese culture in America and what that's done to you growing up, and what that might be doing to your children as well.
I think it's funny because it's true. Like it's funny whenever I publish something like that, all these random Asians start emailing me and go, "Hey, that's me. That was me growing up." So. Whenever there's an element of truth to it, I guess a lot of people relate to it, or at least the Asians.
But it's hard in this world, right? We're in a very PC culture. So if I made any of the references, which are definitely true, I would look like a real asshole, right? Where you can say those things. And I don't know, for a guy who likes, I'll call it Tosh.0 style humor a little bit. I laugh every time you make a joke like that. I laugh, and you can hear Tony laugh too. It's funny. So I'd love to ask you about Udarian. Now that we kind of mentioned him, like how did that feud begin? How did that friendship and feud begin? And just for reference, like I've seen you guys at 2 ECFs, and you both make a point to razz the other guy in public in front of everybody both times. It sounds like this has gone back a while. I'd love to know like where this started and tell some stories of the different pranks you guys pull.
I met Udarian, I want to say in 2010. I think I reached out to him because he put out some really great blog posts, and I was like, hey, let's just hop on a Skype call. This was back when we used Skype and not Zoom. And then we just started talking, and I was like, okay, this guy's a jokester. Let's see what he can take. And so I started ripping on him, and then he started ripping back, and I'm like, all right, nice. Because I feel like if you can go a little bit deeper in the friendship if it's lighthearted, right? So if the guy's not going to get offended and that sort of thing. And I think it just started right away because I don't know how well you know Udarian, but he's a total jokester. Like I don't believe anything that he says at first. Have you had Jackness on your show yet?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so there's one time when Mike was recording a podcast on the beach, and this is at an ECF event, and then Udarian went up to the police officer and said, hey, can you do me a huge favor? Go up to that guy who's recording right now, and then tell him that you need a license to record a podcast on the beach. And then there's like a $5,000 fine, and we're going to have to shut down this event. So for some reason, the officer did it, freaked the hell out of Mike, because the whole time Mike was like, oh my God, I don't want ECF to get shut down. I don't want this beach party to get shut down because of my podcast. He didn't really care about the fine. But then, Udarian ran up to him and said, gotcha. And this whole time, Mike was trying to be considerate of Udarian's event. But that's his personality. He's always trying to prank you. So you always have to be on guard.
Yeah, I think so. When I first met him, he's like super soft, and he's a gentle, nice guy.
Yes.
And then the more I've got to know him, there's definitely that side to him. And it reminds me of me. I'm always doing the same sort of things to my wife or these kids or my friends playing pranks. So it's hilarious that he's like that. I actually remember that podcast though with Jackness on the beach. Yep. Very drunk in that podcast, if I remember correctly.
Was he drunk?
Interviewing random people, and then like the podcast takes a pause. I think he mentions the police officer incident, and then they're in a room. It's like 2 a.m. and he's still interviewing people, very drunk. If I can find that, I'll link to it. It was actually a pretty funny podcast. But I had Andrew on the podcast again. I think it was episode 17, and I stumbled on when I was doing my research on Andrew of like how do I ask him certain questions about like he wrote an ebook way back in the day that which I thought was good on drop shipping.
Back when he used to sell online, you mean?
Yeah. Back when he used to sell stuff. Yeah. When he actually had a business. But like I stumbled on a 404 page, just like clicking through one of his links, and it was your face, and he was just ripping on you, yes. and like your email is legit in there of like email Steve Chou.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know my email was in there. That punk. Okay.
So I brought it up with him, and he was like, "All right, if you get Steve on here, make sure you challenge him to see what he's got coming back." And so I'm curious, is there other stories of like what you two have done to each other as far as the pranks you pull on each other?
I've written some press releases because I always like to make fun of him. The fact that he runs this e-commerce fuel forum, but he doesn't sell anything. So I've written press releases that I published on the forum, like where people called him on it, and then he was, because you actually have to show your revenue in order to get on that forum. And so like I've written posts where he got ousted because he didn't make anything. He got kicked out of the meeting. Like we just kind of rip each other back and forth. I like to Photoshop his face, like getting arrested and that sort of thing, or getting into brawls.
So I ripped him too. I remember his last product that he tried was like a map holder.
Oh yeah, I've got. I think
you have one.
Yeah, it's not in this room. Oh no. It used to be right back there.
But like, where was he in life where he was like, you know what, this Google Maps thing isn't going to work. Let's make a map holder for vehicles.
What's hilarious about that is I said the exact same thing. I was like, who the hell uses maps anymore?
Oh, here's the 404. This makes great audio, me sharing a screen with you. But yeah, isn't that hilarious?
Okay. He didn't put it in exactly for the bots. At least that's good. Yeah.
I asked him if he thought anybody actually emailed you, and he's like, I hope so. I hope people are emailing Steve. Oh, that's awesome.
Sorry, what were we just talking about?
I was just curious if you had other stories of pranks you pulled, because I'm trying to remember the one. New Orleans was the first time I think I experienced it at ECF, and he said something about you like in front of the whole group, and I can't remember. I don't remember the interaction, but I thought he was serious. The very first time he said something about you on stage, he was ripping you, and he held a straight face, and the whole room kind of was like quiet for a second. I was like, holy shit, is he actually like saying bad stuff about Steve right now? And then the room kind of broke out in laughter. But there was that awkward second in there where I didn't know if this was real or not.
See, I would do that to him at my event, but no one knows who he is there. So,
I'd love to
actually, I did have a slide in one of my keynotes at my event, where I said I had a picture of him and it had a T-shirt. He was wearing 3-figure entrepreneur because he was just selling that product. And I think he made like $1,000 or less with it. So,
well, it's cool what he's done. Given the fact that he doesn't have an e-commerce business, and I don't think he's had one for a while. He got rid of right channel radios, and he got rid of the trollingmotors.net. I think he helped just recently on like an off-road one, but it's interesting how big of a forum and community and tight-knit community he's built while also not experiencing the day-to-day ups and downs.
It's ingenious. The business model is ingenious. I wish I had thought of it first. So,
well, look, you mentioned your event. That I've got a million questions about your business, your podcast, like your course. I'd love to know about your live event, like knowing. One big question I wrote out is knowing everyone buys last second in everything you do, right? If you put out a sale, you'll get some buyers in the beginning and then no buyers for a while. And then you'll be like, 24 hours left or 12 hours left. And that's when people actually come in and buy. Talk me through the live event, all the stuff you have to float. But I would assume when you add up what you have to float cash wise and reservations wise, it's stressful knowing that you're not going to sell all the tickets till the last minute when you close the doors.
I'm not too worried about selling tickets because I purposely keep the event small. I don't like big events. I know we met at TNC, but I really don't like that environment. It's like 5,000 people now or something like that.
Yeah, that's too much.
So I keep it small at 200, and at 200 it's manageable. What's stressful is when like there's a pandemic going on and you have to scramble to turn it into a digital event or a virtual event, and then you got to give refunds. It was not pleasant last year at all. But in terms of ticket sales, I would say it's not that bad if it's a small event. I would imagine the pressure for like a traffic conversions is a lot higher, right? Because they're reserving like the convention center now, I think, is it? And So for me, it's more like a hangout for people in my community. And because it's small, you get to see each other all the time. It's kind of like ECF. ECF is small also. But mine's like a focus on learning. We have masterminds that we run beforehand also. So it's really a chance for you to network and get to know people.
Yeah, TNC is bananas. That I was talking to a previous guest about that. It's too much. I think the first year I went there was the year I met you, and I went there alone. Thankfully, someone I kind of knew from my community who ended up being a business partner later on. We connected pretty well. But other than that, it was like I have to run from one end of the Marriott to the other end of the Marriott to catch, Ezra or whoever's on the other stage. Very e-commerce focused people would go from the main stage to the side stage, and you just have to be running the whole time and very fast. And way too many people. Like I didn't even know where to begin, like walking up to somebody and introducing myself.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, some people like that, right? Because it's an opportunity, like everyone goes and the parties are great. But people like myself who are, I guess, a little bit more introverted, I prefer a smaller crowd. So
yeah. So can you walk me through the live event stuff? I've always wondered what it takes, right? So what all are the reservations you have to like set aside in the beginning?
Yeah, so this is the beauty of it. Tony handles all that stuff.
Nice.
So you'd have to ask her, literally, my job is to sell tickets, get speakers, and just show up. And that's our arrangement. In terms of the financial commitment, you do have to make a commitment about how many guests that you think you're going to have and how many hotel rooms that you're going to fill. And if you don't fill those, I mean, you're on the hook for that money, right? So yeah, you have to be pretty confident that you're going to be able to move tickets. Otherwise, you could be stuck with a pretty big bill because that includes food also.
Just out of pure curiosity, how did you come up with the number you thought you could fill? Like based on the number of people in your course, or how did you come up with a number where you're like, I can get this many people to come here?
I think we just kind of worked backwards. Like, well, what size event do we want to have? And I remember that first year, I just wanted 100 people. And I felt very confident. I mean, if thousands of people are willing to pay me like, $1,500-$1,600 for a course, they'll buy a ticket for like $700 or $800 and come out and hang out, right?
And then why East Coast? You're a West Coast guy, right? Like why are you having them on the East Coast?
Okay, so there's a lot of nice things about Florida. One, there's no tax there. Like if you had in California, you'd have to pay tax on that. And then just the costs are a lot less. And then the climate is great. And I wanted to be by the beach, right? Because, during the downtime, it's really nice. Just kind of walk along the water or be in like a beach town. So that was the main criteria.
What stops you from moving there, right? Like you obviously
Florida?
do well. You've got not necessarily Florida. Look, my wife and I have discussed this too of like, we don't have the taxes in Wisconsin that you have in California, but even then it's like, could we move to Nevada or Florida or Texas? And especially in California, you'd be saving a giant chunk of change getting out of there.
We're actually considering moving. We have actually talked about it for like the past year. So our current destinations perhaps are Austin, Maryland, and Texas. Austin, Maryland, and Las Vegas.
Why Maryland? What's in Maryland?
That's where I'm from originally.
Oh, okay.
So I got lots of friends there still. My mom is still there. And DC is really cool. I don't know if you've ever been.
I know this is a bit of an inside joke, unless you know Steve, but you think if you moved home and your mom could see what you were doing on a day-to-day basis, she would appreciate the work you do?
I talk to her every day practically, and she still doesn't get the blogs. She gets the store, right? Because that's straightforward. She still does not get any of the media stuff or the content stuff at all.
But you've been doing this 7-8 years now. Does she still think you should go back and get a job?
Oh, no. Yeah, that's long past.
I've heard
she was a little shocked when I quit my engineering job, right? Because I'd been doing that for 20 years and that's, something stable. And she was like, really? You sure you're going to do that to podcast or to write? Yeah. I don't get that much anymore though.
Yeah. My dad asks me every time he comes over, just what are you doing now? And then I have to explain it and be like, is that going to work this time? And, I've had quite a successful exit at this point and he still, asked me, what are you doing now? Is, how's that going to set you up for the next 10 years? And I'm just like, I don't know. I'll figure it out, I guess. Well, I didn't know if your mom still gave you crap. I've heard you made quite a few jokes about that, but we've been all over the place for the beginning of this. I'd love to go back. I'd love to hear your actual story of like, where were you and why did your business even start in the beginning? Because before you had your podcast and your course and your live event and now your partnership and another course and all this other stuff, it started with one e-commerce business. So can you take us back there?
Yeah, I mean, it just started because my wife went up to me and said, I'm going to quit my job when she became pregnant with her first child. So when she was pregnant, she's like, okay, I'm going to quit. And we were just talking about this, right? California is probably the most expensive place. There's actually a house down the street from us right now sold for $1,700 per square foot.
What?
Isn't that crazy?
Man. Yeah, it's bananas.
I don't know what it's like. Are you in Wisconsin? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'm just outside the Twin Cities in Wisconsin, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much it is per square foot there, but that's insane, right? So I was really worried at the time because we were going to have this kid, and schooling is obviously important. I'm Asian, so school is really important. So we want a good house in a good school district. And those houses at the time were all, over $1 million. This is back in 2007 or whatever, when prices were lower. but you need two incomes. And so we just kind of explore different ways to make up for that lost income. She was making a 6-figure salary. She's working for a Fortune 500 company. And the reason we stumbled upon selling handkerchiefs, so our store is over at bumblebeelinens.com. Anyone's getting married, I'll hook you up. The reason why we stumbled on hankies because my wife wanted hankies for our wedding to dry her tears of joy. And at the time, we couldn't find any in the US because there aren't that many people that sell those. Found a factory in China. We ended up buying a whole bunch, using a handful, and selling the rest on eBay, and they sold like hotcakes. And that's kind of how we got the idea to start a full-blown store on that. And
you were like doing the sewing work in-house, right?
I was doing the embroidery. It actually was my wife's hobby in the beginning. She really loved doing it. But for some reason, as soon as someone pays you for it, it's not fun anymore. And she got tired of doing it.
So she quit before you started? I'm trying to understand the name of My Wife Quit Her Job, which is kind of your brand.
Oh, yeah. So what happened is she was pregnant, and we actually got the business up and running while she was pregnant. And then she also had some maternity leave. And by the end of her maternity leave, she quit her job to run the business full time. And
you were an engineer? Like, how long did that last? Like, when did you actually get to quit your job?
Oh, I quit in 2016. Yeah, so much later.
You were there a long time.
Yeah. Well, I love my job. I still miss it, actually. It just didn't make sense. Actually, here's a story of that. I don't know if have you heard the story?
Go ahead.
So what ended up happening was I think the businesses were making 8 to 10x more than my day job. And so I dropped down to 4 days, and then I dropped down to 2 days, and then I dropped down to 1 day. So I was one of like the top 3 designers at the company that like I had my hands in like a third of the product, like my code. And so during that 1 day, when I dropped down to 1 day, I was really just there for tech support in case something broke. Like I would be there to help fix it. And that was the best arrangement possible because I could go and hang out with my coworkers. I could actually work on my own stuff. Like sometimes I went in on my off days just so I could have a nice quiet office. But then one day, like the VP decided to leave the company and a new VP came in, pulled me into the office and was like, so what exactly do you do here? And I was like, actually, I'll be frank with you. I don't do anything. I'm just here like as an insurance policy. And then, so that ended. Yeah, so that was the only reason why I left.
Did he ask you kindly to submit your resignation or did he show you the door?
Oh, no. He didn't. It's not like I got fired or anything, but they were like, hey, I don't know if, we can have this arrangement anymore, basically.
Yeah, I did. So I had a very similar thing. I sold my first business for like a year's salary, which was the greatest day of my life back then in 2016. And then I was going to leave and really push hard into some other projects. And they were like, how would you like to stay on 2 days a week and keep your insurance, which is, difficult to find when you're an entrepreneur, especially back then. And so I stayed on, but I became the absolute worst employee that ever existed, I think. I said a lot of things I shouldn't have said, and I talked back, and I showed up, but I didn't work super hard. And so eventually my mouth, ran me out the door, I guess. I said something probably shouldn't have said to my boss, and they were like, you know what? I think you're having more fun with this internet thing. And they did the whole air quotes thing, and they were like, why don't you just go practice that for a little while? It was a good push in the right direction for me, but I was curious whether you were on your best behavior when you got that talking to.
Funny? You know what's funny about all this is once I started making money with both businesses, I started speaking my mind at work, and that actually got me higher up because I wasn't rude or anything. I would just say, hey, this isn't going to work. Whereas before maybe I cared too much that I wasn't willing to be as bold. But I think the fact that you're willing to voice your opinion and be bold is actually what gets you promoted, ironically.
So what do you miss there? Do you miss the people? Is it a lonely entrepreneurship journey?
No,
you're missing the people?
I miss the people. Okay, so in engineering, you need a lot of money to do some of these things. Like we had like this big staff of engineers we created a microprocessor is what we were doing, right? You can't get that doing what we do. And everyone there had a PhD from MIT, Princeton, or Stanford. Everyone was smarter than me. And just to be able to work in that environment where that the person working next to you is smarter is like a really good feeling.
So how do you replicate that in the entrepreneurship? Like, how do you go find people smarter than you, if you will? Because, I think you're pretty high up there. You're doing amazing things. You've got a lot going for you. How do you replicate that in the entrepreneurship world?
It's different. In the entrepreneur space, you definitely have people that can do stuff better than you, and they're smarter than you in certain ways, but not in a technical way. And that's what's missing for me, like the technical aspect of all this. I'd actually considered starting like a SaaS company, or definitely not a hardware company because that's too much money. But even a SaaS company requires a pretty large upfront cost for engineering, and it will consume your life. And the reason why I did all this stuff is so I could spend more time with family. So that's why I ultimately didn't pull the trigger on any of those things. But yeah, it's harder to replicate the technical stuff.
It's actually a question I had for you. I reached out to you regarding PostScript, I think. I heard you talking about it, and I just wanted to, somebody to give me a little insider information of what I'm not thinking of. And you said, works great if you're on Shopify. And I immediately knew Steve Chou hand-coded this onto his site that's not on Shopify. You make jokes about this all the time, that you would rather code things in your own site personally. And I've always wondered, why don't you have a SaaS product, right? Why haven't you created a Shopify app or an app for any of the other app stores, or a SaaS product for e-commerce? You've been around a long time. You obviously have the knowledge and the skills. So I was genuinely curious why you haven't created something.
Yeah, so it's one thing to create something for yourself. It's another to create in such a way that a regular person won't break it, and then you have to document it, and then you have to support it. So those latter two things, and I used to do this at my job, designing microprocessors, the latter two things are not the fun part, right? The fun part is getting it to work and having it do what you want. What's not fun is supporting it and maybe even dumbing it down, so to speak, so that the regular person doesn't get into trouble. This is kind of why I like Google products, because they give you all the bells and whistles, whereas Apple, they hide everything from you. That's why I'm not an Apple fan.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Those are fighting words to half the people listening to this, for sure.
I know.
But look, SaaS is scalable, right? Infinitely scalable. So if you think of e-commerce, there's so much friction there. You get an MVP out, you get feedback, you have to iterate it. You need to go through the process with your manufacturer. You need to get it over here on a boat. You need to do a whole nother launch, right? And there's just so much friction in the iteration process where you can constantly improve your SaaS product, and it's infinitely scalable. You're creating one product for as many people as you can get to use that product. Versus e-commerce, you're buying a product, you're expensing the cost of goods sold, you have zero fucking money because e-commerce just sucks all the money out of your pocket, and then you have to go buy more product. It seems that would be very, very appealing to someone as smart as you.
It is. I think it's just a bigger commitment to do a SaaS product than an e-commerce. I mean, because you were in e-commerce. With SaaS, I mean, just the cost of engineers, it's a different beast. And I think people out there who are thinking about doing apps or whatever, like if you don't have any experience in the developmental space, then you might be in for a rude awakening if you just kind of randomly decide to start a business like that. Like we had dedicated teams for verification, testing. Whenever you roll out, like even the smallest change, there's this whole process that you have to go through. I mean, it's a lot of work and it requires a lot of expensive manpower, I think, to do it right.
And people in this industry, right? Jungle Scout would be a great example.
Yep.
I know this had to have crossed your mind, at least considering this, right? And so have you reached out to people who are in that arena, and what do they say? Do they look back and they're like, man, this sucked getting here? Or do they look back and are happy with all the work they had to do?
It's funny you asked that question, because I used to ask Greg all these questions about how he, started his company and that sort of thing. And if you think about it, the beginning is really, I talked to Nathan Barry of ConvertKit too. The beginning sucks, right? Because you're spending all this money up front and you're getting paid like $50 a month here, $50 a month there. And it's only later, once you've got critical mass, like there's this like tipping point where it's all great. But getting there is like a slog, like with any business. But with the SaaS company, you have to kind of fund that, for quite a while. Whereas with e-commerce, you start making money right away. Sure, you have to invest that money back into inventory, but at least you can just take some money off the table, really, in the beginning and, pay for yourself, essentially. With SaaS, I think it's more deferred for the longer term.
Do you think you'd have to raise money in order to do any SaaS? I mean, if you think of Shopify apps, they're pretty small, right? Like myself and an old business partner, we created a Shopify app that would do all the schema markup for you, very similar to some of the ones that are out, the JSON LD. There's quite a few SEO apps. It wasn't that hard. I mean, he had to hand code everything. I think we created a better version. Shopify's DMCA takedown took us down. Somebody said, that's the same code I have. Well, it's code, man. You can't copyright a schema markup code, but somehow Shopify fell in. So we stopped doing it, but it didn't take too much effort to get it onto the App Store and actually start making sales.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. On a small scale, you can probably do that. I probably would not write a Shopify app. I just have like this thing against being dependent on like a marketplace. This is kind of why I'm kind of, I sell on Amazon, but I'm anti-Amazon just because they have too much power, right? Like Shopify could literally just write the code into their base cart for some of these apps and just put them out of business overnight, right? If they ever decide to do that. It's just too much power. I probably wouldn't write a Shopify app. I considered doing a WordPress plugin at one point. But like if I were to do it, if I were to do a SaaS product, I'd want to create a SaaS product. And this is the terminology that I always use, that would get the customer pregnant. And what I mean by that is they invest so much time. Like email marketing is a perfect example. You put all your flows on there, you implement all the forms, you're not going to switch. Like something drastic has to happen for you to switch. That is probably something that I would work on because I'd want the churn to be really low. And every time I want to do a SaaS product, I have a talk with my wife, and then we have this talk where we remember why we got into business in the first place, which is to hang out with more kids and have more flexibility. And I just don't feel like SaaS will allow me to do that. It might be more personally fulfilling to me from a professional standpoint. Actually, for sure, it would. But you always have to remember like the reasons why you got into business in the first place. Do you have a family, BK?
I have two stepkids and I've got a baby boy on the way. So
okay, yeah. So you're probably in the same boat, right?
yeah, I mean, trust me, there's days where I don't want to spend time with family. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Especially during these COVID times, like being in this room. You might not be able to hear him on the mic, but I can hear in the background, right? And I kind of miss a little bit of the being away from them as well. But time and freedom is the reason I started. I want to be able to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, and that it's part of a reason I haven't gone into something so time consuming myself as well.
So spending time is not the right term, actually, because you're right. Sometimes you just want to get away. I think being present is the right term, right? You just want to be around in case they need something. Like you're not hanging out with them all day because you go nuts, right?
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Just the fact that you're available, like if someone comes to me, like during the day, they can just open the door and ask me something. Or I think that's important to create good citizens in the household. So that's been my wife and I's philosophy.
So there's so many points in there I wanted to talk about, but I'll touch on one. Why did you start? What was you obviously wanted to recreate that income, but like, what is the deep why for you? Is it freedom? Is it time freedom? Is it, being able to be there for your kids, like you just mentioned, or is there multiple?
I mean, it comes down to time freedom. So here's the thing, like my parents, they were first generation Chinese. They came here with no money at all, and they had to work their way up, like from pretty much nothing. And as a result, I didn't really get a chance to see them that much in my childhood. I mean, after work, sure. But, for most of the week, they were gone. My mom and dad have accomplished great things. Like my mom, she invented a cure for a disease. It's a rare disease called glycogen storage disease. I had her on my podcast. That was the most amazing interview that I'll remember forever. But, she had to work hard for that, nights, weekends. So I didn't see her all that much. Same with my dad. He was an electrical engineer. He was more on the entrepreneurship side too. So he used to work his butt off. And I just wanted to make sure that when I had kids, that wouldn't happen. So I think I went to the opposite extreme. Like I'm always around now, and I try to keep my schedule open. But yeah, that's pretty much what instigated this for me.
One way or another, you're going to mess your kids up, right? Like it feels like kids, You know what I mean? Like you're going to do something wrong. So I go through the same thing. I grew up fairly poor. We didn't really do anything as a family. We couldn't really go anywhere. We had a couple 2-3 vacations where we took the minivan to Texas or Colorado. And I watched my dad, as he would say, rob Peter to pay Paul, move it to the next 0% credit card, to the next 0% credit card, just to float that money so that we could have those couple vacations. And now I have the means. Like we spent a month in Florida a couple months ago. And we're struggling with how do we teach them that this is a privilege, that this isn't just what you get. And so I love that I'm here for them and that I can do things for them. But man, I don't want to push them the other direction of they think they're entitled to everything in the world either. That's
definitely a problem. Like my wife and I have considered just sending them to a third world country for the summer. And then, or some crazy camp where they have nothing. There's camps I think I saw it. I can't remember which show. There was a show I watched where they go into the wilderness and then they try to survive for as long as they can.
Alone?
That's it. Yeah. We were watching Alone together. And one of the guys, I think the winner, he runs a camp. where it replicates alone, kind of like that environment where he teaches you how to survive on your own. I so want to send my kids there just so one of my kids is a picky eater, and sometimes he won't even try a food. And that gets me so mad because like, what if you didn't have any food? I'm going to send you on that camp. I'm going to send you to that camp and see what you eat, you know?
I'm fascinated by this idea because I'm trying to figure it out myself, right? Like the hardness, if you want to call it that, of what I had to grow up through. And I was always different too. I was always told I wasn't normal, and I didn't make friends very well because I was weird. That turned me into who I am. That's exactly why I am where I am right now. And I wouldn't change it for the world. Right. And so I wonder if, how do I give them those moments where it's challenging, where, you know, their mother often steps in and doesn't want them to be hurt or have to struggle through things. And I'm like, that's what makes you. You have to learn how to problem solve, and you have to learn that things suck sometimes. It's just the way that life has its ups and downs.
I mean, it's a battle now because like my wife's always paranoid. Like when we were kids, we used to just be outside all the time. I just told my parents I'd be home at like 5 and I'd just go out and play and come back. These days, like everyone's just a little bit more paranoid. And so it's like a struggle between my wife and I. I was like, hey, just let them go and do whatever they want. But then she's worried because in the news, you hear about all these things like kidnappings and whatever. So.
Yeah, we have the same thing. The kids ride their bikes in our driveway, and she watches them like a hawk. And I'm like, when I was a kid, my dad would be like, get out of the house and just go, right?
Exactly.
At like 8 p.m., he'd whistle out the door, and that was our sign to come back in. And I was the youngest, too, so it's different with them when they don't have any mentors or kids around. And we moved to this neighborhood right before COVID, too. So we didn't even get a chance to like meet the neighborhood people before. She didn't, want them playing around with other kids or hanging around other people. And so it's been weird.
Yeah.
Well, look, I want back to your business. Sorry, we kind of sidetracked, but that's what happens on the show. I love it. How did you're selling handkerchiefs mostly to weddings? I would assume there's other like places. I mean, even my dad used to rock a handkerchief every day. Grossest thing I've ever seen. But like most of this, I would assume is for weddings is where you get most of your sales. What happened in 2020 with?
Well, that was actually the case in the old days. When we first started, it was all weddings. Now we've kind of diversified to different age groups. But yeah, you're right. During COVID, no one was buying anything. No one was having weddings. A lot of our customers are hotels and airlines also. They stopped buying. So yeah, COVID was tough. March and like part of April was like a low point last year. It's pretty scary, actually.
And I would assume most of your students, I know a lot of the businesses I consulted with and a lot of friends, greatest year ever, right? Like everyone stayed home. They had all this free money and they just shopped. They shopped to their heart's delight. And so I would assume it had to be hard to watch other people, other businesses going bananas, and you're sitting here trying to figure out how to make ends meet.
I think I was a little too worried during that month to go bananas about other people, right? So it was more like emergency mode. Like, okay, what can we do to make up for this revenue from weddings and hotels and whatnot? And so that's kind of how we got into the mask game, personalized quarantine gifts, and that's kind of how we bounced back during those months. But yeah, we were too worried about ourselves to be worried about what other people were doing.
So what do you sell to hotels and like airplane companies?
Mainly napkins and table linens.
So like the white napkin that gets laid across my tray on Delta, is that something you would make for perhaps
not Delta? For others? Ours is more like smaller airlines. Like more of the concierge ones, like Marquis Jet type of thing, as opposed to like a big airline like Delta. Like Delta isn't going to use like our napkins because ours are a lot nicer. But like a premium service that caters to like, celebrities and whatnot, they'll use nicer linens in their airlines.
If it was me selling to those premium airlines and jet companies, I would assume I would try to network really, really hard to see how I could get myself on one of those. Is that something you ever did, or you just sell to them and you're happy with the sale?
We do the reverse. So if we do get a customer in that realm and it's a big customer, we'll reach out to them and establish a relationship. For a little bit, like this is before COVID, like things kind of changed once COVID happened. But before, like when Amazon was a little bit more transparent, we would look up people who bought an abnormally large quantity of goods also, and we reach out to that Amazon customer. We'd find like you don't get their phone number, but you can stalk them and call and say, hey, we noticed you purchased a large volume. We'd like to give you a dedicated rep, a coupon code, and we'll make sure that whatever you order gets there on time. So we try to keep the ones that are big. We haven't done that much outreach, mainly because we're a little short staffed right now. We can't hire still right now actually, my wife doesn't want to hire anyone right now during COVID because she doesn't want to interact with anybody.
Yeah, I can't blame her. Amazon now, I don't know if you saw this the last couple of days, we're not even going to get names anymore.
Really?
Yeah, so you won't even like be able to verify anything beyond an order number. If they can produce an order number, that will be your verification. But they're taking away names now too, which is just
Okay.
crazy to me.
I mean, that was the last thing, right? I mean, they already took away everything except for the name.
We brushed on it earlier. If you don't like third party things, but for a long time I was like, it's cool to play there. It's a great place to start a business, and I didn't mind it too much. And I really haven't had any of the bad things happen to me. Knock on wood. I did have. They lost a trailer. They reimbursed me. They found the trailer, and I had to throw all the stuff away anyway. It was like these dog supplements were rotten, right? Being in a hot trailer all summer. I sent a well-worded letter to Jeff at Amazon.com, and they reimbursed us like right before Christmas. It was a really nice thing. But I've never ran into that stuff, so I wasn't like on the whole anti-Amazon train, where I think both of us know some people in ECF who definitely are. But man, it's getting brutal. Like when you for a while there, they wanted you to handle the tax stuff, which is crazy because it's clearly their customer.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Then they took away the phone numbers, they took away the addresses, and now they're taking away the names, and it's kind of crazy. Where do you see that going? Where do you see the ultimate end game? Like they can't obviously recreate every single product that's on Amazon, right? But there has to be some inflection point where people start leaving, you would assume, or do you think that the sales override that?
I mean, my philosophy generally is to just try to be in as many places as possible, right? You got to diversify, and you can't really ignore Amazon because they're too big. What I'm thinking should happen though is that they need to be broken up a little bit, because there's no way that they should be able to use the information from the marketplace to private label their own products. That to me just sounds illegal or monopolistic, so to speak.
So this one's hard for me because I came from a drop shipping world, right? And so a few different companies we did this where we would go sell another brand's products, and it's pretty easy to ride a brand's keywords and garner sales on Google AdWords and other places. Use their brand equity to garner your sales. Eventually, I got very, very, very good at SEO for e-commerce, and so we would own the generic keyword for the entire market we were in. And then at that point, you kind of own all the traffic. And so if you can go out and create a better product, which is obviously step one, you have to make a better product than the ones you're selling, you can simply direct that traffic to yours. So same as Amazon's doing, but doesn't it sound a little better when it's some guy in Wisconsin and his small team versus Amazon?
I think it's different. You're implying that you're creating a better product. Amazon is literally cloning the exact same product, the look, the packaging in a lot of cases too. Like my friend got knocked off, and the packaging was almost exactly the same. I don't know if you've caught on. There's this video that went viral, and this is camera bag. Have you seen it?
I don't think so. No. Camera
bag got knocked off by Amazon. It is the exact same shape, almost exactly, but with a different label on it. That's this type of thing that Amazon's doing. It sounds different than what you're describing.
I thought it was weird. They a couple years ago at least, they were like, you need to now put in the name of your manufacturer and where these goods are coming from when they get shipped to us, right? And I ship from the USA, so I legitimately had to put in where these products were coming from. I thought that was a little bit weird, but I think it's a slippery slope, right? If you tell the government to step in and break up Amazon, that's power I don't necessarily want to give to a bunch of old white dudes, if I'm on it. Like, who are they to decide what these are? I don't know the right answer here, and that's kind of where I'm pushing you to. What is the right answer?
What's also different is that they're also placing their products right below yours on your listing, right? So let's say there's this camera bag that's, let's say $300, but then all of a sudden there's Amazon's branded camera bag, looks exactly the same, but it's like a third of the price. Right underneath the add to cart button. What are you going to do? That just sounds illegal to me.
I still struggle though, because it's their platform, right? Like,
it is.
Who is telling them that they have to follow some righteous rules, right? Or like that there should be somehow justice here that they don't deserve. I mean, it's their platform. They're the ones who brought the traffic. They're ones who built the house.
It is. There's just a certain point. It's because of their size that they have an inordinate amount of control. That's why there are those monopoly laws out there, right? Like if someone owns everything, they have full control over everything. Amazon's almost like that. I mean, in my opinion, they are kind of like a monopoly at this point. So that's a difference than if you, like a mom and pop guy doing it. It's not going to affect the larger ecosystem, but in Amazon's case, it will.
Well, I think they have other problems to clean up too, right? Like the amount of pure junk on that website is baffling to me. they should do something to clean up the third-party marketplace. They should do something to prop up their sell. I mean, that's where the majority of their revenue comes from on Amazon.com. They should, pump up the good ones, right? And then I think it's so weird to me that, I don't know about you, but every day I get a refund notification of some sort, but it was like delivered late by carrier, and I'm paying the refund on that. Or there's quite a few that just baffle me that I'm paying the refund on. Or like I ordered some heaters for the garage the other day. Didn't work. It didn't heat up the garage. And so I put them back in a box. The UPS guy grabbed them off my porch, and immediately I was refunded. And I was like, man, I feel bad for that company. Like, how do they know what I'm sending back? Is there any process by which they actually look to make sure it's the right product, that it's good enough? And then, with these supplements, it's really weird. I'll get returns on these supplements. I'll pay the refund. Then they'll determine at their warehouse that it's resellable. No, it's not. Like, none of these are resellable when they've gone to a customer and been opened. There's so many little issues there that really bug me.
Those bug me, but those are things that I feel like they have the power to do whatever the hell they want. You know what I mean? Because it's like, if you don't want to sell on there, you don't sell on there. For some reason, it's different to me than them just copying a design, running an ad right below the existing product, and undercutting everybody else based on their data. Those things that you mentioned they're annoying, certainly, but they aren't as egregious in my mind, like to the point of like where the government should step in.
In your course, do you tell people to sell on Amazon?
I do. I tell them to start, but I tell them to validate on Amazon and try not to get too intoxicated with the sales. Sometimes students get intoxicated with the sales and they don't end up launching their website, but then something bad happens. They get a suspension, and then they get kicked in the butt. Like, oh my God, okay, now I see the reason why you need to have your own platform, or you need to diversify your sales. But yeah, so the reason why I do that is for psychological reasons, right? When you're first starting out, building your own audience can be difficult, especially if you don't know what you're doing, right? Running ads, learning how to drive your own traffic. So it's always nice to get that first sale, however you can get it, right? And it's just easier on Amazon because the built-in audience is there.
Yeah, no question. I can't imagine starting a small dollar product anywhere else, but I mean, they have 50% of e-commerce sales. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm very curious whether the government steps in, and if so, who. You've seen Facebook and all of the social media send somebody there to testify in front of Congress, and they literally don't have a clue how the internet works. So it'll be baffling to me how they can step in and say Amazon needs to be broken up, which you might be right. Like, they are turning into a monopoly for sure, especially on e-commerce.
Well, I mean, just separate out the private label portion from the Amazon marketplace, right? If anything. I mean, this happened with Microsoft, right? With the browser. Like, they won, so they couldn't bundle, or they couldn't force you to use Internet Explorer when you had Windows, right? It just takes a long time for this process to happen.
How far does Amazon get before then, right? Because they're already big enough to compete with UPS or FedEx. They could have their own delivery system at this point. AWS is an absolute monster. Half of our defense runs on AWS. Half of the world runs on AWS. And so how long can you wait before they have monopolized another market in another market?
Yeah. I mean, that's beyond my pay grade. I just think something needs to be done at some point, at least just on the private label side, right? That's my main objection at the moment.
What is the ultimate solution? They separate the third-party sellers from the how are you separating it so that they can't just rip you off?
You basically separate their private label arm as an independent entity.
So Amazon Basics you separate off.
Sure, they have other brands too, but yeah, essentially what you said, yeah.
But they have all the data already, right? So it seems like it would be a very slow process to wean them out.
They have all the data already, but yeah, it would just over time they wouldn't have the data anymore because things change really quickly, right? I mean, in India, I believe this has already happened, right? India does not let Amazon sell their private label products in India, I think, or something like that. I don't remember the exact, but I know India took a stand on that.
Well, they're literally everywhere. I mean, we got a Ring on the front door. We've got Alexas in every room. I probably just made her go off by saying that now. They're everywhere. How do you avoid Amazon? Like, I want to fight back. I want to join in because it's annoying. But at the same time, I also enjoy them growing my business for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a slippery slope. So that's why I actually spend most of my time working on my own stuff. I don't own an Alexa. Actually, I own one. I just don't have it hooked up. ever since, because I don't want people listening. I don't even have the Google one hooked up. I just don't trust, and not that we're saying anything illegal in our house, but there have been stories about them using that footage to prosecute people or
wow,
whatnot, right?
That's true. We closed the camera on ours, but it still via sound knows when I'm in the room. It lights up. We got a free one with the Ring with the big screen on it. I don't know if I've ever played music on that Alexa. I've played a few things, but I have my music blaring in my office all day long, and I'll walk back out to the kitchen and get a water or something, and it'll be on the screen. Do you want to listen to this song that was just on in my office? And I'm like, this is getting a little weird for me. But definitely on the prosecution side, I'm not doing anything illegal either. Maybe we should talk about what Bumblebee Linens is actually selling here in your case. But that would worry me, I guess. If it has to be being recorded somewhere, right? It helps their algorithm understand people better.
All these services have some human element to it to make the algorithm better. So there's probably tons of humans listening to this stuff to make the service better. Like it's not all machine learning.
I don't think I've ever even thought about that. That does creep me out a little bit to think about, the guy who has a full-time job listening to this, trying to make the service better, but who knows what he's listening to all day long.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, supposedly it's supposed to be anonymous, right? But yeah, you have to have humans to see the algorithm.
All right, now you're creeping me out. Let's move on to something. Let's move on to something more in your wheelhouse. Like, where did the podcast begin? So you had Bumblebee Linens. Your wife quit her job. You were still working, but when did the podcast come about? And was it as simple as like you wanted to just share in your journey, and you weren't sure where this was going to go, or did you have a business plan the whole time when you started?
I did not have a plan. I think I was talking to my buddy Pat, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you should do a podcast. It's working out great for me." And I was thinking to myself, okay, it's actually pretty easy to just pick up a mic. And I wanted to do an interview-based show specifically because I had come to realize before I started my podcast that meeting people was the most important thing in business, or one of the most important things. And so having a podcast allows me to reach out to anybody. And most people will say yes to talk to you for like an hour. And so I've mainly used my podcast as a networking vehicle. There's never no business plan because I had never planned for it to make any money at all, to be honest with you. It was just an outreach vehicle. What are your motivations?
Yeah. Look, in the beginning, the first one I ever did was telling my journey, and I knew that would lead to some opportunities, right? So I did some consulting of other people who were in that same high-ticket dropshipping course I was in. We sold like Shopify audits. We sold quite a few other like little rinky-dinky things. We should have created a course on the back of that. It did lead to my most fruitful partnership. I consulted with a company. First 3 months, they did $250,000. Then we remained friends for the next year where they hit $1 million. They brought me on board. We scaled 1 to 11 million in 2 years, and then they bought me back out. And so it led to some really cool things. When I started the BK show, as I was telling you before the call, I was kind of wondering where to go in life, honestly, because I exited that company and that was my identity for the last couple of years of all I focused on. And then I realized the same thing. My friend George says relationships beat algorithms. That's his little trademark phrase he has, and he's right. And so I wanted to, number one, share the story of all the interesting people I was able to meet over the last couple of years in the masterminds I was in. But also I wanted to be able to talk to people who I might not be able to talk to. Now, this is where I'm different than you. I'm actually scared to reach out to some of these people. I was nervous messaging you. I met you, we've talked before, but I don't really know you. And so, do you have the limiting beliefs there when you I have a note here to take down a bunch of names you've gotten, and I totally didn't actually take that note, but I can think of like Derek Halpern off the top of my head. You've had some big names on your show. There's no fear in your heart of reaching out to them?
I don't, because usually I meet them first at an event. It was challenging last year because I didn't go to any events. But usually what I'll do is I'll just go to an event, and it'll be late at night. We'll be hanging out at a bar, and I'll just talk to them about non-business stuff. And then just kind of see. So I'm not afraid because we've already met. If it's a cold call, I've had success doing it that way too, by just presenting the credentials of the show. But in general, my normal MO is I meet them first. It doesn't have to be like a long meeting or anything like that. Just maybe even like a hey, just so they have an idea of who I am. And then I get them on the show. So I'm not afraid of the outreach part.
Yes. So that's where I'm at too. Almost all of the interviews I've done to this point are people I know fairly well or really well in some cases. Now I'm getting to that point where I've kind of burned through all of those relationships that I know really well, and it's more fringe people now, and I'm feeling that, whatever it is, I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve to get these people on my show. It's all boiling up as I'm reaching out to people that maybe are still up on a pedestal for me, or whatever it is. I wonder. I also don't want to, with this show, many people go on many podcasts and they tell the same exact story. It's the same 30 minutes on every single show they're on. And I purposely made a point of this one to break through that noise. I didn't want to have you, for instance, right? I didn't want to have you come on here and tell the exact same story of Bumblebee linens that you've told on others. I just want to have a conversation. I want to get to know people. I actually want to build a relationship with you and not just lend you my audience for 30 minutes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's people on the professional podcast circuit, right? Where it's the same thing. But usually they have some sort of motive, like there's a book coming out or something like that. And so, yeah, I mean, you did a good job. I totally did not expect to be talking about the things we talked about today.
Well, that's good. I'm doing my job. Look, I just want to build real relationships, right? There's real people on the end of this thing. And so that's my goal. I mean, in the beginning, yours was just to build deeper bonds. Obviously, you said you've met these people in person.
Yeah, it's deeper bonds. I mean, just meeting someone, they're hardly an acquaintance in a lot of cases, right? And just having them on the podcast. Usually I'll talk to them, before, for at least 30 minutes before the actual record button gets hit, or sometimes after as well. And that's when the real talking starts.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Do you have a process in place for your podcast? Do you have a pre-interview that gets sent out by VAs?
I do not. Do you? Oh, no, you don't, actually.
I don't. Yeah, not with you. I try to do my own research. And again, it's getting harder, right? Because I don't know the people. I have a general idea of the story I want to tell. And I do like when everything just gets meandered. We kind of go off in tangents. But everybody has stories that when they tell themselves, they don't think it's that big a deal. But usually other people are like, wow, that's incredible. And I want to get those out of people because everyone's story is unique and amazing. We just don't ever think our own story is that unique and amazing.
I mean, looking back, there's probably one or two guests I probably should have done a pre-interview with. But I mean, for the most part, I like it to be impromptu. I want the person to have no idea what I'm going to ask.
At what point did you transition from Bumblebee Linens and your podcast into a course, teaching people how to start?
The course actually came before the podcast. The course was launched in 2011.
Oh, wow.
So I actually didn't want to do a course. I think I remember it. I had no interest in teaching a course, but enough people were asking for it. And so I actually launched it with no content and say, hey, if you guys are interested and you pay, I think it was $300 at the time, I'll promise you I'll put out content weekly just for you guys. And that's how it started.
So how did you have an audience back then? If you didn't have a podcast and you only had Bumblebee Linens, how did you have an audience? Oh, so you were blogging back then?
I started the blog in 2009.
You were just talking about what you were doing to grow your business?
Yep.
2009.
Yeah, that's how it all started, actually.
2009 must have been a glorious time for SEO as well, right? You could just...
It was a lot easier, yes. It was a lot easier for sure.
I imagine... Did you partake in any of the Black Hat fun back then that you could get away with?
And then I got burned, and then I vowed never to do it again.
I never got into that. I've done mostly white hat to this point. I would say slightly gray, but sure sounded like fun back. The same with Amazon, right? In 2014 or 2015, I think you could have done a lot of crazy stuff back then.
I wouldn't say anything I did was outright black hat. It was gray hat that they eventually busted.
So I do want to talk about your course. I've heard you say many times, and you should if you're going to sell this, that you have the best course on building an e-commerce business on the market. And I want to know why. So I've never taken your course. Full disclosure, I don't have a filthy little affiliate link to pitch right now. I would love to have learnwithstevechou.com and forward you over there. I don't know a ton about it. I've listened to your podcast for a long time. In fact, one that came out last week as we're recording this was the girl who has a dollhouse business.
Yeah.
Incredible. I'd love to know what is in your course. Why is it the best course in the world?
Yeah. So obviously best is a superlative, or it's hard to say that you're the best, but I actually sincerely believe that it is so, because I do everything myself and I have the technical knowledge to do everything. I know how everything works, and I document everything that I do with my store implemented by myself. And I've taken a number of courses out there just to kind of see what other people are doing out there, and just the volume of the material and the level of support. Most of the time when you sign up for someone else's course. They have some sort of team that just kind of responds to you and whatnot. But I go out of, so one, my course is not a volume course. So the people that do sign up, I actually spend a good amount of time with them. I will go and critique their site and redesign it for them. Like I'll bust out Photoshop and I'll redesign it for them, pull out their value props and that sort of thing. There's a lot more personal attention. And what I found from teaching it this way is that whenever I have someone successful, like you just listened to that podcast episode with the student, as soon as something like that comes out, I get a ton of signups. So success begets more success and our interests are aligned. And that's why I run it the way I do. Actually, it's kind of like my philosophy for Seller Summit. Keep it small, intimate, and people get to know each other better. You can give them a little bit more attention and they do better.
So you, speaking of the dollhouse girl, I thought that story was incredible, right? Any other interesting businesses you've seen come out of there? Like I started this podcast on the premise that I knew a lot of people doing a lot of interesting things and that the internet has allowed you to be in any market, you could be into underwater basket weaving and create a course on how to do that. And you're going to have customers. The internet has allowed you to find your tribe. So someone selling dollhouse products like little bottles of bleach, that was very, very interesting to me, that podcast. And I actually love to learn more about what she does, but do you have any other interesting stories that stand out to you of students that are in very interesting niches?
I mean, one of my favorite students in the class, he sells his own pottery. So he's an artist. And in general, those are the hardest people to help, right? Because one, they can't produce in mass. And two, pottery is pottery. It's kind of like a commodity, right?
And they're creators, right? They're not marketers.
Yeah, exactly. They're creators. So with Joel Cherico's his name, he can actually command like between $500 and $1,000 for just a mug now, because he's developed like this presence online and he's built up an audience. And incidentally, that was the impetus for my second course, Profitable Audience, teach people how to do this stuff. It caters more to creators, right? Because I feel like, and I've gone all in content for these last couple of years, because once you have that audience, you can always find a way to make money with it. So that's been my philosophy.
So let's transition there, right? I think it's really cool that you're teaching people e-commerce. And again, I think you can be into anything you want to and put an e-commerce business on the back end of that. But talk me through the new stuff that you and Tony are doing at theprofitableaudience.com. Like what are you doing exactly to teach people to grow an audience? And then like, is it simply like get people behind you, or are you trying to transition them into your e-commerce course, or how are you teaching them to monetize?
They're two different things. I mean, the Profitable Audience course is, certainly you can transition to physical products and e-commerce, but it's also digital courses, digital products, membership sites, anything along those lines. But the whole point of that one is to build an audience. So you're growing your email list, your SMS list, whatnot. And we focus on blogging, YouTube, and podcasting in that course.
Well, I think just your free content over there alone is incredible, right? Like, I told you when I was in Florida, I didn't do a whole lot of work. I just listened to a lot of podcasts, including your new one, right? And so you have a bunch of great topics in here of like the important traits of success, how to overcome imposter syndrome, how to repurpose your content, how to make money online immediately, how to suck it up when you want to quit, like all the stuff that beginners think about. Like, how did you sit down with Tony and write all these out? Was it just years and years of hearing all of the beginners you're working with say these things?
Yeah. That's just from experience. These are just issues I deal with every day in my class, really, also. So a lot, when you're first starting out, it's mostly just in your head. When you're a little bit more experienced, that's what I think when the strategies and tactics come into more play. But yeah, I would say in the beginning, it's probably like 80% mental.
You're doing a ton of stuff. Like, feel free to throw an elevator pitch for any of these things on the back end, but you've got mywifequitherjob.com, you've got your podcast, you've got Bumblebee Linens, you now have Profitable Audience, you have a live event, you have another podcast for Profitable Audience. I've heard you say you separate your days of the week. And so I used to do this. I was partners in quite a few businesses at once, and it got very stressful. So I would have Monday for one business, Tuesday for another business. I've gotten away from that now that I've really pared down, but now I'm starting to get the itch to do, another business here and another business here. Can you walk me through your methodology of separating the days of the week, like how you do that?
Yeah. So I do separate out the days, but it really just kind of depends now what needs more work, which is why I have partners, right? I'm partners with my wife on Bumblebee Linens, and I'm partners with Tony on the other stuff. So I'm able to do things the way I do because I can depend on them at certain times to to get stuff done when I can, right? So I like to get all the content stuff out in the beginning of the week. And then Wednesdays and Thursdays, I have office hours for those courses. And then I always at least devote a day for Bumblebee linens. For the most part, Bumblebee linens, my wife handles the day-to-day stuff and I'm in charge of marketing. So my work with Bumblebee linens only accelerates when there's something new that I'm trying to implement with the site or some new initiative or just managing like the ad accounts and that sort of thing.
So I think where I'm struggling is the organization side of it. And so I'm kind of hoping you have a little nugget for me here of like, let's say, and I'll just use your businesses. So let's say Bumblebee Linens this Friday. I'll get to Tuesday and stumble across a podcast with a great idea. Or I'll get in the middle of the day and think of like 4 things I need to do just randomly, right? As I'm working on, let's say I'm working on Tuesdays is my podcast day. While I'm working on the podcast, I'll get like, a bunch of ideas for business that's a different day. How are you organizing that so that you stay on task and get those ideas into where they need to be?
Yeah. So let's say it's Tuesday and I have something exciting for the store that I thought of. I'll just write it down on my to-do list and then I'll work on it the day it's supposed to be worked on. I mean, that's really the only way you can do it. Because otherwise, if you're just working on a whole bunch of different things the same day, like the time wastage switching tasks is just too great.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm running into. So where do you keep your to-do list? Like I have it in Apple Notes, and I know you're a huge Apple fan, so it's very unorganized.
My method is worse than yours.
Is it bad?
I have a Gmail draft.
Yikes.
Yeah. I used to use Google
like an email draft?
Yeah, like an email draft.
That's terrible.
Yeah. I used to use Trello.
Yeah.
And I used to use I switched. I had Trello and I had
Asana or something.
Google Keep.
I've never heard of that.
I didn't use Asana. You know what it is? Ultimately, I'd be on my phone and I'm always in Gmail, always in it. And so it's just much faster for me to just have it in a draft as opposed to like launch the Trello app and then drag the little boxes around. It was just much faster. So that's why I ditched all those other things.
Yeah, I started in notes and it seemed great until now I have like 50 notes in here. I've got the one that's like this week to-dos, right? And day by day, but I got to scroll. I'm trying to find something more organized. I brought a partner into my pets business, big Asana guy. So we moved to Asana, not a fan. Personally, I've used ClickUp, I've used Trello. I don't think any of those are for me. I'm not sure what the right answer is. I was kind of hoping you had the key. I don't know if I want to do a Gmail draft.
So Gmail draft for short-term tasks.
All right.
And then I have a Google Sheets for long-term tasks. Mainly because I'm always in those apps. So you just got to, I feel like you got to organize your stuff where you're the most there with the least amount of friction. All those other apps had a ton of friction for me, which is why I ended up just not even wanting to open those apps and updating them.
Yeah. I think the friction for me is like, I've got a Chrome for every business, right? So I've got the one I started with a long time ago, BK Commerce, which is just like my everything. I've got, a very G-Unit sounding Gmail address from way back in the day that I use for like personal stuff. I've got Ben at benkeneggendorf.com. I've got a couple businesses. I've got my Paramount Pet Health one, and I've got a Chrome window for everything. So there's friction there. Even just
that's what you mean. Okay. I got a solution for you on that.
Okay.
I use Gorgeous for all that stuff.
For your
Social
own personal
media,
stuff?
Yeah.
Huh.
It all comes into one place, and it's managed that way. And I actually have my VA answer my emails sometimes.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's all. I only have one login. I only have Gorgeous up for all my correspondence today.
Sweet.
So I have like four or five businesses just all coming in. They just come in one central location, and then you can tag people, or you can just have those tickets go immediately to someone's inbox who's in charge of that. But you can still look at it if you want. Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Something I'm going to need, because otherwise I'll get like an idea for business Z, right? And I'll have to head over into that Chrome window, find that exact tab for the Google Sheet where I'm keeping notes, or put it. Yeah, it's so convoluted.
What's even more impossible
expedite
is managing your social media. Like if you're running a Facebook ad and you have to monitor whether people are saying negative things on it, that all comes into Gorgeous too.
Yeah, Facebook doesn't even tell you half the time now. Like it's a process to get through that to try to figure out where the comments are, and
it would be impossible without that tool. Yeah.
Also, I totally hate Facebook. I don't know how old you are, Steve. I think we're right around the same age, but most people 5 or so years younger than me don't even use Facebook. Like that's going to die sometime soon. I hate it. If I didn't have to run businesses, I would not be on Facebook. I don't think.
I agree with you. Actually,
it's terrible.
Yeah. Actually, I'm pretty anti-social media in general. Like I feel like it's required and it's necessary but I just don't like it. I don't like what it does to your like your psyche.
Where do you
I'm
consume
terrified
then?
of my kids. What's that?
Where do you consume then?
I consume just for learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's basically me. A lot of podcasts, but lately it's been deep stuff into like, a lot of mental thing. Like Tim Ferriss has done some cool stuff along, like Stephen Pressfield was on the other day. And then I've gotten deep into like NFTs and where that could bring e-commerce and things like that. So
actually, that's gotten on my radar too. I haven't fully grasped whether it's going to work or not in my mind yet, but I mean, apparently it's really caught on. It's crazy. The concept is crazy.
There's no way it doesn't work. Honestly, I don't see how it doesn't work. It'll be interesting to see how people such as yourself who are teaching profitable audience, like the people who are creators, this is a real opportunity for them to get paid for the long term. I think there's going to be a lot of losers in the beginning. There's going to be a lot of businesses that step in here and create an NFT and go for a money grab and they destroy themselves. And then I think there'll be a little bit of a bubble and everybody will be like, well, NFTs didn't work. Well, the internet didn't work in 2000 either, right? It'll come back. I don't see how it doesn't work, but it'll be interesting for me personally to see, how does someone teach that? How do you personally like teach those creators in your profitable audience course how to mint something on the blockchain and which blockchain to choose and where to sell it?
Well, I'd have to do it myself first. I don't teach anything that I don't do myself. That's my other policy in general.
Create a meme about you, Darian, and
so
put it up there. Let's see what you can do.
It could be some Chinese joke or some quote or something, maybe, and then I'll NFT that baby. See, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited. So I think before this comes out, I had Taylor Holiday on where we briefly touched on it. I'm an investor in a company called Dibs, where they fractionalize sports cards. They have NFT'd the sports card and then fractionalize it so that you can buy fractions of it. I want to get all those guys on here because I'm fascinated with NFT and that's where I consume too. The other place that I do consume is like TikTok, but man, I could get stuck on there for hours. Like,
yeah, I'm getting ready to get on TikTok. I'm preparing
you gonna try to
myself.
Teach?
No, not teach. Establish an audience on there.
Yeah.
Teaching always comes much later, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, in order to establish the audience, you got to teach some stuff. Or are you just going to dance with your daughter, or what's the plan when you get on TikTok?
Oh, well, I've already been researching it for a while.
All right.
I just need to come up with like a content plan that I can maintain for the long term. That's the hardest part for me.
It's interesting what goes wild on there. So I've done a few personally, and I've done some like with just like my cat sunbathing in the window exploded. I'm like, what? Like, why that one? It doesn't make a lot of sense what goes wild on there and what doesn't. But it's a cool platform. There's so many young kids who are very, very creative, and nobody's holding anything back. It's not like I'm going to show you a little glimpse and then come buy my stuff. It's very. I don't know. I think it's a really, really cool platform for the future.
Yeah, I was thinking about just getting on and doing some quotes or inspirational quotes or tips or something like that. It's all business focused, obviously. Not going to be taking any dance lessons or anything for it. But
I'd watch you
see what
dance.
happens. Yeah.
I'd click the like button on you dancing for sure. Well, look, I don't want to hold you up. Give me some quick elevator pitches, man. Why should people come check out your podcast or Profitable Online Store or Profitable Audience?
Yeah. So I'm not going to pitch, but I'll just tell you what those things are all about. So mywifequitherjob.com is my main website where I just kind of document all of my experiences across everything. The podcast is where I get tactical. I interview successful entrepreneurs, and I like to ask the hard questions and dig deep on, why their business work, what strategies are working for them. The Profitable Audience podcast is more suited, I guess, for beginners who are just starting out and how to build an audience, right? An email list, an audience of raving fans. I have 2 training classes. Profitable Online Store is more if you want to sell physical products in e-commerce. Profitable Audience is if you want to start an audience. And then every year, hopefully, due to COVID, once COVID's over, I run an annual e-commerce conference called the Seller Summit.
So why should anybody listening to this come join? What differentiates you from the 900 other courses out there?
It's the most complete course out there. I mean, there's over 400 videos, 100 something hours of content. You should use it as an encyclopedia. Right? Like if you want to do Facebook ads, you jump straight to the Facebook ad section. If you're looking for a product, there's a special section on that. It is very complete. It's literally everything I do with my store to grow sales, make it successful. And I cover Amazon as well.
Well, I love it. I don't know how I never bought it because I was such a huge fan of yours way back in the day. I think I was focused more on the high ticket things. So I'm shocked I never bought your e-commerce one. Your Profitable Audience one actually like intrigues me. I'm sure there's at least a few nuggets in there where I'd be like, oh, that's a really good idea. I'm not sure why I'm not doing that.
That one's interesting because initially it was just a blogging course, but then like we're like, hey, why aren't we covering podcasting? Because we podcast. And then why aren't we covering YouTube? And at the time, I didn't feel comfortable covering YouTube because my YouTube channel had just started. But now it's like 1 year later, and my YouTube channel is starting to take off now. Just even revenue wise, just from ads alone, it's making like $1,800 a month after a year. And I mean, that doesn't sound like a lot of money, but this is just this is just gravy, right? Like the amount of leads that it's brought in for my business has been amazing. And it's just in one short year using the principles that are taught in the class, kind of like a live case study, so to speak. Like, oh, I screwed up here, or, this is why this didn't work. This is what I made the change, that sort of thing. So the YouTube section of that course is actually like an ongoing case study too at the same time.
Yeah, YouTube works. It's kind of like everything else though. Like you said, one short year. That's the hardest part for everyone. They have to get through that first year where no one's paying attention to you. Your video's getting 9, 10 views. And if you can push through that, eventually you do start building this flywheel and momentum.
Yep. All the content stuff was like that. Blogging, podcasting, YouTube. You have to stick with it at a pace that you can maintain for the long term.
Well, you said you hate social. Where can someone who wants to reach out to you reach you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah. So what's funny is I'm getting back into Twitter. So my Twitter handle is mywifequit. DM me there. I'll respond.
I would recommend Twitter to everybody. I'm a big fan of it on this show. So go follow Steve. Heck, go follow me. I'll put all of that in the show notes. I appreciate you coming on, buddy.
Cool. Hey, thanks for having me.
Big thanks to Steve for coming on my show. I appreciate you, buddy. If you are a newbie and you're listening, check out his Profitable Audience podcast. I think you're really going to like it. They definitely tackle a bunch of limiting beliefs and things that you're thinking about why you can't start your business or some roadblocks you see in the way. Check it out. I think you're really going to like it, and it's really great to hear two different sides, Steve's opinion and his partner's opinion as well. I think you're going to like it. If you are advanced, check out his My Wife Quit Her Job podcast. Very tactical, very e-commerce focused, and I think you're 100% going to take away at least one nugget every episode you listen to. So big thanks to Steve. Check him out and follow him on Twitter. He said he's leaning into Twitter. I've seen him posting quite a bit lately, and so definitely go give him a follow on Twitter. You will find all of those links in the show notes. Heck, give me a follow on Twitter as well. I appreciate all of you sticking around. This is episode number 39. That's amazing. The audience continues to grow. I appreciate all of you. If you haven't left a review already, please leave a review on iTunes. It really does help. Join my mailing list. All of these links are in the show notes. Follow me on Twitter. Go check out Dropship Podcast. If you're into the high-ticket dropshipping world, I think you're going to like what John and I are doing over there. So dropshippodcast.com for that. And appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening.